Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for tuning into Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with the day's highlights. Banks here in Korea have been rolling out biometric ATMs recently, but there are questions on whether the added convenience comes at too high of a risk. With the global slowdown showing no signs of picking up anytime soon, major central banks around the world are hinting at rolling out more stimulus to lift their economies. These stories and more coming right up. But first, the Korean won saw extreme swings on this Friday, settling just above 1,234 at market close, the weakest in 5 years and 8 months. The local currency pared most of its earlier losses in the day after the Finance Ministry and Bank of Korea issued a joint warning about severe volatility, saying the government will do all that is needed if necessary to stabilize the won. Bank dealers suspect foreign exchange authorities sold off dollars to prop up the won, according to Reuters, after the currency had dropped almost 1% before the warning. Meanwhile, the stock market saw a relatively calm day, with the Kospi closing up nearly 0.4% at 1,916 and the Kosdaq up nearly 1% at 644. The head of Korea's central bank has warned that economic uncertainties at home and abroad are greater now than ever before. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said there's increased global market volatility due to low global oil prices, instability in the Chinese market, as well as Japan's introduction of negative interest rates. Meeting with financial officials and bankers on Friday, Lee said the business environment for local banks is expected to worsen this year, noting that already lenders' profits have nearly halved last year. He said the difficulties in the global market will not have a huge impact in Korea, as local banks have the capacity to absorb external shocks, but he did call for the need to boost risk management efforts. Korea's producer price index has dipped to its lowest level in almost 6 years. According to the Bank of Korea, the index stood at 98.52 in January, down 0.5% from the previous month. The figure marks the 7th straight month of decline and a drop of over 3% from the same month last year. The central bank attributed the fall to faltering global oil prices amid mounting concerns that the supply glut will continue. Dubai crude, Korea's benchmark, plunged over 20% in January from the previous month. Another sector that has been gloomy for months now is Korea's ICT sector. It has long been considered an important engine for growth, but the economic slowdown has hampered exports. And the Korean government is hoping to reverse this trend by stepping up its support for companies in the field. For more, here's our Park Se-young.
The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning and the country's leading IT organizations have been coming up with ways to boost Korea's ICT exports, which have been slumping for the past 4 months. The private and public entities include Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics and the state-run Institute for Information and Communications Technology Promotion. The ICT Ministry has vowed to support entities exporting to markets deemed to have great growth potential in the IT sector. For starters, the ministry will support entities exporting goods or services related to information security to the Middle East and Africa. The ministry will help them export goods related to broadcasting contents to countries including Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Britain, and Poland. The ministry says it will target China and the US as potential markets for content incorporating K-pop music and ICT. With the lifting of global economic sanctions on Iran, the ministry says it will reinstate its ICT partnership with Tehran. The ministry plans to facilitate information sharing among businesses to increase production of various custom-made software contents for foreign markets. In the virtual reality sector, the ministry will utilize on- and offline foreign distribution channels to export broadcasting contents. Entities in the hardware sector asked the ministry to help their foreign branches gain a competitive advantage in foreign premium markets. In response, the ministry vowed to increase visits to some of the regions to revitalize Korea's ICT exports there. The country's ICT exports plunged nearly 18% in January from the same period last year to around $12 billion, largely due to increased competition from cheaper Chinese goods. Park Se-young, Business Daily.
Meanwhile, lawmakers at Korea's National Assembly are questioning government officials again on this Friday, the second day of a two-day interpellation session. Questions this morning focused on what the government is doing to breathe life into the sluggish economy. Now, lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties have been questioning the officials on their efforts to counter external economic threats, such as the slowdown in China and more potential rate hikes in the United States. Seoul's shuttering of the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex and the status of pending economy-related bills have also been under the spotlight. The OECD has cut its global growth forecast for this year to 3% from the 3.3% projection it made late last year. In its interim economic outlook released on Thursday, the OECD warns that global economies have flatlined and an urgent policy response is needed to tackle a series of problems. It also urged governments to rely less on central banks to stoke growth. Global growth is seen at 3.3% in 2017, and by country, the United States is forecast to grow 2% this year, the UK 2.1%, and the Eurozone 1.4%. In Asia, China is projected to post growth of 6.5%, India almost 7.5%, and Japan 0.8%. There are mounting speculations around the possibility of central banks around the world unleashing further stimulus measures to quell the global turmoil. Our Lee Joo-young takes a closer look.
The minutes of the European Central Bank's January meeting, released on Thursday, showed that the bank's top officials are worried about financial market turmoil and slowing growth in China, along with conditions in other emerging markets. With such concerns, many analysts believe that the ECB may roll out another set of new monetary measures when it meets on March 10th. Markets are pricing in an 86% probability that the ECB will cut negative deposit rates by another 0.2 percentage points in March, as sentiment towards the Eurozone remains bearish.
As we start the new year, downside risks have increased again. Amid heightened uncertainty about emerging market economies' growth prospects.
And the ECB is not the only one in the negative range on rates. The Bank of Japan introduced a minus interest rate policy last month to prevent financial market volatility from hurting business confidence. Despite such efforts, though, the policy has not brought about the desired effect so far, with the Nikkei falling by more than 11% last week, the largest slump since October 2008. With that, eyes are now on the BOJ's next policy meeting next month, with major investment banks saying there's a greater chance for more stimulus. Some analysts are forecasting the BOJ will cut the deposit rate to minus 0.5%, as policymakers have been arguing the yen would have appreciated even more had they not acted. While Europe and Japan are getting ready to take bolder actions, the U.S. Federal Reserve is faced with a dilemma of its own. Following an interest rate hike in December, the U.S. Central Bank was hoping to finally begin its return to normal policy. But as more foreign central banks like Europe and Japan are now favoring the tool of negative interest rates, the Fed is considering backing away from its previous projection of pushing up rates 4 times this year. Many economists project it will raise rates twice instead, possibly in June and December, given market concerns about slowing Chinese economic growth and slumping commodity and stock prices. So with the number of important monetary policy meetings coming up around the world, eyes are on whether further stimulus will bring relief to their respective economies or add more uncertainties to the already volatile global financial market. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And Japan saw its exports tumble by the biggest margin in more than 7 years last month, largely due to the slowdown in China. The country's finance ministry said the value of Japan's outbound shipments fell by nearly 13% in January from a year earlier. Imports dropped 18% compared to the same period last year, leaving the country with a $5.7 billion trade deficit. Exports to China, Japan's biggest trading partner, were down nearly 18% year-on-year. The outbreak of the mosquito-borne Zika virus spreading across Latin America and the Caribbean is expected to have a short-term economic impact of $3.5 billion on the region this year, according to the World Bank. The international financial institution said, although the figure is quote-unquote modest, considering it makes up 0.06% of the region's GDP, countries highly dependent on tourism like Belize, Jamaica, and Cuba could face losses of more than 1% of their GDP. The World Bank said it has made $150 million immediately available and is ready to offer more funds if needed to finance anti-Zika efforts. Such efforts would include identifying people most at risk, providing prenatal care for infected pregnant women, and funding public awareness programs. The Korean government will also invest nearly $2.5 million in research and development to find a treatment for the Zika virus, amid growing concerns that it might reach Korea. The project is expected to focus on developing core technologies for treatment and diagnosis. Ari Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
The Korean government is stepping up efforts to prevent a Zika virus outbreak in the country. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning says it will work towards finding a cure for the Zika virus. It plans to invest more than $2.4 million to hire 3 teams of researchers over the next 3 years. Researchers will be tasked on developing core technologies that can help define the virus's pathogen, as well as a diagnosis kit. They will also aim at predicting the possibilities of a mutation of the virus if it enters the country. The ministry also hopes to collaborate with international networks, such as the Global Research Collaboration for Infectious Disease Preparedness, in order to secure the specimen of the virus directly from infected areas. The plan is part of the government's comprehensive precautionary measures against the possible spread of the Zika virus in Korea.
Although there have been no confirmed cases of the Zika virus in Korea, the ministry is making preparations so that the country can readily deal with an outbreak if it happens in the future, utilizing the lessons learned from coping with the MERS outbreak last year.
The Zika virus, which can be transmitted through mosquito bites, is suspected of causing microcephaly among babies. The incubation period for the virus is known to last 2 weeks, but the survival period or the virus's pathogen is currently not yet clearly defined. The World Health Organization said the Zika virus has spread across at least 30 countries and has been linked to thousands of birth defects in Latin America. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Internet banking, mobile banking, and now biometric banking. Korea has joined some of the most tech-forward countries in the world in rolling out ATMs that rely solely on their clients' physical traits. But is the public ready to trust them? Our Eunice Kim finds out.
This mirror is a window to this ATM. His eyes act as the key to open it. After a scan verifies his identity, the bank customer can make deposits, withdrawals, transfers, or check balance. Uri Bank became the first commercial bank in Korea to roll out these iris-verifiable ATMs last month in 5 locations throughout Seoul. In December, Shinhan Bank ran biometric trials on palm vein scans, while state-run IBK tested its own iris recognition system within its staff.
내 목소리로 결제.
Financial firms are seeking future-forward ways to guarantee security amid breaches of personal ID data and credit card information that have become too frequent. But is the public ready for them?
I wouldn't sign up for iris or fingerprint-enabled banking. I'm just not convinced security is ironclad.
Financial firms say a data compromise is unlikely because the biometric information collected is encrypted before they're stored in their servers. But hackers have already uploaded YouTube videos showing how easy it is to lift a fingerprint and make credit card purchases on a smartphone. One solution offered is to have the companies and the government jointly manage one fully searchable database. But experts caution the damage done could be disastrous, given that physical traits are not amendable.
Central management can be helpful when it comes to ensuring compatibility. But say there's a problem with that database. It will affect all banks, spreading the damage.
Just last year, the U.S. government's Human Resources Department admitted to losing millions of federal employees' fingerprints to hackers, not excluding those in intelligence with special security clearances. Fast forward to Korea today. Given that each bank is collecting different biometric information, it seems that biometric banking in the mainstream is still a ways away. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for staying with us throughout our program. We'll be back next week with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Have a great weekend.